Just over a year ago, I made the single biggest and most impactful decision of my entire life, and I gave my life to Jesus. So today I'm going to be telling the story of how that happened. Let me start off by saying I was never an atheist per se. I was raised in a Christian household. I had loving parents, very supportive. I was forced to go to church on Sundays. I read my Bible every now and then, the usual thing. So now that you know that, let's start my journey in university. I was a pretty regular guy. I went to class during the week, started partying a little bit, started participating in some destructive habits, took a little bit of drugs here and there, nothing too major. After university, I started my first corporate job. At this corporate job, this was when things took a bit of a turn. I had to shift my mindset from being the college kid who went out over weekends, got the girls, and life was just pretty easy overall, to going to an 8 to 5 job. It really took a hard knock on me, because at university, you get to a level where you're almost at the top of the food chain, like your final year, postgraduate, life's great, party every weekend, life's just awesome. Then I got to the job where it's like you start at the bottom, no one really likes you, you considered nothing, and you've got to work from the bottom all the way up. And on top of that, I was really, really abused, not physically, but mentally and also emotionally. My boss always constantly told me how worthless I was, and I would never achieve anything, and I was a failure, and I should be so happy for this job because there's millions of other people who would do this job for a less salary. So it was just really bad environment for me to work in. I would get messages during the night asking me, have I done this? Did I do this thing? F this and F that, and it was just foul language, and it was just a very bad environment to work in. So mentally, that started playing a really big role in my life. So during the week, I started feeling like a failure. I was almost treated like this slave, like this errand boy. So I felt like a slave during the week. So obviously, naturally, I had to escape that, right? So during the weekend, what I would do is I would participate in destructive behaviors. So I started numbing the pain with alcohol, and a lot of it too. And then it got to a point where it wasn't enough. So I started introducing drugs again, but this time at scale. So it got to a point where every weekend I was so blackout drunk, I couldn't remember anything. I was always losing my phones. I was waking up in places I couldn't remember what happened, waking up next to different people. It was just a mess. So during the week, I was this guy who was worth nothing. I was always being told how worthless I was. And then over the weekend, I'm the cool guy. I go out, I get a lot of girls. Everyone comes to my house after the party. And it was these two lives that I've lived. But for those of you who've been going through this pattern or who have experienced something similar, it gets old. You can only run away for so long until it catches up to you. So when the COVID pandemic hit and all the clubs closed, I had nowhere to run anymore. And that's really when things got really, really dark for me, because now I didn't have an outlet anymore. Whereas before COVID, at least I could go to the nightclubs, do drugs, and get drunk on alcohol and hook up with girls, and I could escape that way. So life was awesome during the weekend, but then reality hit me on Monday and it sucked, but it was okay because I had something to look forward to. When COVID hit, I had nothing to look forward to anymore because, there was no clubs open, you couldn't get alcohol anymore, and it wasn't as fun anymore. So that's when I got really depressed, really, really miserable, and I almost lost the urge to live, really. Remember, all this time, I still considered myself a Christian, right? Because between all the chaos, I would still go to church sometimes, I would still read the Bible sometimes, not fully understanding or comprehending what it means to be a Christian. I just kind of knew you need to go to church, you need to read a Bible, you need to pray sometimes, and that's basically what I knew about Christianity. And I knew there was this Jesus character, and I knew the basics, but I never really understood it. So anyway, one day I'm driving to work, and I worked at the pharmacy, so we weren't closed during COVID. I was still working full time, even though there were no nightclubs or any entertainment things happening during the time. I remember the one day I was an all-time low. I just got off the phone with my boss, and he was telling me again I'm an effing loser, and he was just shouting all these horrible names at me, and I was in this emotional state again, and just really feeling like I want to give up on the world. And so after that phone call, I put the phone down. I was driving alone in my car from the one branch to the other branch. For some reason, I just started praying, and I just started talking to God, and I told God that if this is the life that He's created me to live, then I don't want to be on this earth anymore. Like, I genuinely didn't want to be alive anymore. I didn't want to experience another day in my life anymore. What's the point of going to bed so scared to wake up to go to work because you know you're going to go through a situation that you absolutely hate, and then just reliving it over and over and over again? So as I was praying to God, and I told God that if he could just show me a way out of this situation so that I could just get some freedom back, so that I could just get my life back and get a little bit of joy back. And I made a promise to God. I said, God, that if you can just show me a way out, I promise I will just stop all my destructive behaviors. I will never drink again. I won't do drugs again. I won't do any of this stuff anymore, because at the time, even though I considered myself a Christian, I still knew obviously that drinking and getting drunk and alcohol and drugs and all these things are wrong. So I promised God in that God, if you can just show me a way out, God, and just give me some level of freedom, even if I make less money, I just don't want to be in this horrible situation anymore where I feel so worthless. And I was truly like crying out to God, like truly surrendering myself to him. And at that moment, I felt this overwhelming feeling of love, joy, excitement, and fear. It's hard to describe, but it was just like this overwhelming feeling of emotions. And I remember bursting out in tears, and I couldn't control it. At the time, I didn't even understand really what was happening. I saw it as an encounter with God, but I didn't understand, like, was that at the time, I never even knew something. There was like a Holy Spirit, and I couldn't understand all the dynamics between it. So it was just really overwhelming, but I knew it was an encounter with God. And when I felt that immediately in my heart, what I did was I drove home. This was still on a Friday. I just entered the weekend normally, and on that Sunday evening, I wrote down my resignation letter, and I wrote down that I'm quitting with immediate effect. I did this on the Sunday evening so I could go drop off all my work laptop and everything from my work at the office on Sunday evening. And I said I quit with immediate effect, not really knowing what I was going to do at the time. And so I did that. I gave him my laptop, so I knew the Monday I wouldn't have to go in again. Remember, guys, this was during COVID, so this was a really scary time for me to quit, because the unemployment rate in South Africa was higher than ever. But obviously I was pumped up because I made this promise to God that I would stop drinking, stop doing drugs, if he can just give me a way out, and he can just give me some level of freedom where I'm not so crushed and feel so worthless. So that Monday, what I did was I moved back to my hometown, which is a small coastal town in South Africa called Jeffreys Bay. It's the small coastal surfer town with one main road. So I moved back into my dad's house. He had a garage. I used my last savings to revamp this garage into a workstation. So I put an aircon in, and I did the floors over of the garage. I put a bed and a small desk. This was all the savings I had. And my dad said, I'm giving you 6 months. You can live here, do what you need to do, but then you got to get a job or you got to do something again. And I obviously knew at the time that I had to make this work. Like, there was no way out. Like, I'm not going back to this job. Once I got settled into the garage, I started drawing up my plans, like what I was going to do, how I was going to make a living for myself. So at the time, I just figured the easiest way for me to make money really quick is by starting some form of coaching business. And at the time, I had a lot of fitness knowledge. I've always loved going to the gym, so I just basically started a fitness coaching business. I started creating some content in order to actually get traffic for the fitness coaching business. So that happened, and again, that's a story of its own, but I'm gonna try and keep this part short because it's not really applicable to the story. Long story short, fast forward time 2 years, there I was making a really good living for myself. In the process, I stuck to my promise to God, which was I'm not going to drink anymore. I'm not going to use any more drugs. And COVID's passed now, right? So when the clubs opened up eventually, I never went back into that industry. I just kept on working, disciplined, focused. Now looking back, what I see, what happened was I traded my addiction of alcoholism and using drugs for self-improvement. So I became obsessed with self-improvement. I was working all the time, and it turns out it was just as destructive as the alcohol and the drugs and all the parties was back then. But at least this time, I got some kind of reward from it, which was financial gain. I had no friends at the time. I was super lonely. I would say I had a depressed state of mind. And once again, I continued down this path. I eventually got deep into materialism. I would rent cars on weekends, Ferraris and all kinds of fancy cars just to drive, to show people what I had. I was just kind of trying to impress everyone, and I bought Rolex watches, and I was just really, really dumb, right? And all this time I thought, wow, God's blessing me with all this money and all this cash flow and everything. It's so awesome. Like, I couldn't even believe like what God had done in my life, because I told God, I just want some freedom. Even if I make less money, I just want some freedom. Please grant me this and I'll never drink and party again. And obviously I stopped drinking and partying. And like 2 years later, I was making so much money. I had all the freedom in the world. But again, I got to a point where I was once again miserable. I was once again at a place in my life where I felt so unfulfilled. I felt so alone. The only difference was this time I wasn't in my dad's garage. I was in a penthouse, in a hotel, sitting on the top floor, looking out, just wanting to jump off the building, because I was just so empty and so lost. And at this point, I was really confused too, because I didn't participate in any drugs anymore or partying anymore. And in my mind at the time, I thought being a Christian meant you don't drink, you don't do drugs, you go to church and you read your Bible. And I ticked all the boxes, right? It's like, went to church on Sunday, read Bible 3 times this week, didn't do drugs, didn't sleep around. I'm a Christian. So I was a Christian in my mind. I had all this money, but I was miserable, and I couldn't understand why I was so miserable. And I literally just wanted to end my life. But instead of ending my life, it led to me giving my life to someone who actually wanted it, to Jesus. And we're going to get to that part really soon. So anyway, one day during this really depressed state of mind time where I'm lonely, I'm at this apartment in this penthouse, I have this awesome life in terms of monetary, I have a lot of money, I have status, social media really started popping off, but I had no friends, and it almost felt like I had no purpose. I was alone, depressed. I just hated life. Anyway, so during this time, someone messaged me. This one girl messaged me. She's actually from Germany. She came, she saw my social media, and she's like, yo, Timon, I'm actually in South Africa. I would love to see you and connect with you in person. And so at the time, I said yes to this girl, right? Because I'm just like super depressed and I'm lonely. I'm like, well, why not? Let me just like do this something. Maybe it's fun. Maybe she can be a friend for me or whatever. And so I just said yes. And at the time, she had something in her bio about Jesus, like something Christian related. But me too, right? Because I'm still a Christian all this time. Even though I didn't really fully comprehend, I still considered myself to be a Christian. So I'm a Christian, she's a Christian, let's meet up. Just 2 Christian people. So that's when everything changed for me. When I met up with this random girl from Germany who messaged me, who was in my exact same city, just traveling. And so I meet up with this girl, and she comes over and we have a conversation, right? And we start talking about life. And she asks me like, what's my favorite movie and all the basic questions. And I tell her, but here's the really weird part. So everything we spoke about, she would mention Jesus. Like she would bring up the name Jesus or God or something about a spiritual journey or faith. And it was really, really weird for me, because you got to remember at the time, I didn't understand all this stuff. I just understood Christianity as a checklist, like you tick the boxes, so you're a Christian. But this girl was like, I thought at the time, whack. Like she would ask me, what's my favorite movie? And I would be like, Vikings, like I love Vikings. And she would say like a Christian movie name. It's like, that's a bit weird. But anyway, like what's my favorite like song? Like what kind of music do I listen to rap music and trance and this and that. And then she would give me like Christian music, like Christian songs, Christian artists. And I was like baffled. Like I couldn't understand what was going on. Like, is this girl like nuts? Has she lost it? Like, how can a person be like this? She always refers to something biblical when we talk about stuff. So anyway, as this day passes, I tell her that she can sleep over at my place. Obviously, just on a friend note, I had like a couch there and everything. And she's like, no, she's just going to go home rather. And sleep at the place with the people that she was staying with in South Africa, which is people she met online. And I thought at the time that was kind of weird, like you can just sleep over, it's chilled, like me at the time, I would do anything like that, like sleep over at girls' houses, it's normal. So anyway, she went home and I felt very conflicted that night. Like something inside of me started stirring up because I couldn't understand this. Why am I feeling so weird about this Christian girl? Because I'm also a Christian, but she's just like a weird Christian. Also, I thought at the time. And so that Sunday, she messaged me and said, do I want to go visit a lion park with her and the people that she's actually staying with here in South Africa? So I was like, hell yeah, I'm gonna go with them again, spend the day with them, because now I can see what these other people are like, the people who she's staying with, because maybe they also think she's a little bit, off, like something is not, like not going too well there, like something's weird about this Christian girl saying all this stuff. So I figured, yeah, I'm gonna go on this trip, and then me and the other people can talk about her being a little bit different, or I can just check things out at least. So they picked me up that day. And as it turns out, they're exactly like her. Like they are identical to her. Same story, just Christian songs, Christian movies. They just talk about Jesus. But it was so weird for me at the time. It felt like I was in this different world because I was so conflicted in my brain because I've always been around Christians my entire life. How could it be that I went through school, high school, university, my corporate job around Christians, but I couldn't understand why these Christians around me were so weird. Like I couldn't understand it. Like they were Christians, why is it so different? So we went to a restaurant that day with her and the people she was staying with, and they even prayed for the guy, and they told the waiter that they feel something bad has recently happened to him. He's had a bad experience. Is everything okay at home or whatever? And he mentioned that his brother actually died. I think it was the previous night or the night before that. And so he was crying, they were crying, they prayed for him. And at this stage, I was like completely just overwhelmed with confusion. And I couldn't understand what was happening around me. But at the same time, I felt so at peace with these people. Because remember, at the time, I was in this dark place of feeling like lonely, feeling unworthy, and feeling like no purpose. But with them, I was so happy. It's almost like time just flew past. Like it's almost like time just flew past as I spent time with them. And a big part of me just wanted to be with them the whole time because it was just really joyful. Like imagine that you go to a restaurant, you see a guy, he's looking a little bit off, you pray for him, he's happy. It's just these good conversations. They talk about love because obviously Jesus represented love and he was all about love. So I could feel the love that these people had for everyone, really, even for me. And as I'm sitting here now, I know they could see at the time, like I was so probably confused and I had one foot in on both sides of the world. But obviously they just treated me how they treated each other. And it was just such an awesome time for me. So anyway, that whole day passes. We go to the lion park, awesome experience. But I'm in this weird place of like still not really understanding what's happening. So I got home that evening when they dropped me off. And that night, I asked myself the question, are these Christians just too much, or am I not quite there yet? And from there, I really had a hard time sleeping. Like I would dream about getting baptized, and I would dream about these people and the conversations we had, and there was just a lot of spiritual warfare going on. I remember at the time I would try and read Bible, but I would struggle to concentrate and focus on reading like one sentence. And so, long story short, once that happened, about a week after that, I started looking up some things. Like for the first time, I started opening the Bible with a different set of eyes of like truly wanting to understand, like, who was this Jesus guy exactly that all these people spoke about? Like, what did he represent? Like, what is this stuff all about? And I became obsessed with understanding who Jesus was and what the Bible was all about and what exactly is the Holy Spirit and all of this stuff. And that's for the first time when I genuinely understood the gospel and what it was all about. And then I had this burning desire in my heart to just get baptized. Like I wanted to give my life to Jesus fully. I wanted what these people had so badly. And so fast forward a week after that, that Sunday, I got baptized at church, and it was the most amazing feeling that I've ever had in my entire life. So I got baptized, and as I rose up from that water, I felt like a completely new person, washed away completely. And after I got baptized, my life changed completely, because I fell in love with Jesus for the first time. And I got to really know what it was all about. And I just saw all the lies that I fell for all these years of Christianity being a checklist and this and that. It's like, no, Christianity is about having a relationship with Jesus. It's about fully surrendering your life and giving your life to him and walking in obedience and then knowing God's going to do everything together for our good. But I wasn't walking in obedience, and that's why my life was so miserable, because I was living for the world, but then I wanted the benefits of being a Christian, but then I wasn't a Christian. So when I fully surrendered to God and I started walking in obedience, and I'm not saying I'm perfect, but there is a difference between messing up willingly every single day versus messing up and then having genuine remorse and regret and repenting and praying to Jesus and asking forgiveness. So I understood all of this once I gave my life to Jesus, and here I am 1 year later, sitting the most happy and fulfilled version of me. And I can just honestly say that you can chase down all these avenues, because Lord knows I have. I tried girls, drugs, materialism, money, status. I've tried all of it, and nothing fulfills me like the love of Jesus. And my entire life changed that night I got baptized, because I felt worthy. I felt loved. I felt like I didn't have to constantly try and find validation in all of these different things anymore. And that's when I switched over my social media content to spreading the gospel in my own unique way, sharing my story, telling people that, I've tried the drugs, I've tried the girls, I've tried the parties, I've tried anything, and nothing's fulfilled me like the love of Jesus, because it's the single biggest decision and the single most impactful decision of my entire life. And how could I keep that to myself and not share that to the rest of the world? Because I know there's so many lost people, so many people in Gen Z that are like me back then, who love Vikings and who party and who drink, but consider them Christians. And I want to open your eyes that you cannot have it both ways. You cannot have one foot in the world and you cannot have one foot for Jesus and think you're going to experience this awesome life and you're going to experience the love and the peace of Jesus, because you've got to fully surrender in order to receive the benefits of being a Christian. And that's why I'm creating this video, and that's what my brand is all about. It's about having you see the truth that the world sells too many lies and too many people are buying it. And I just want to open your eyes to seeing the truth. And the truth, the way, and the life is Jesus. And He changed my life. He changed my life in a way that no amount of money could change, no amount of status, fame, girls, parties, drugs, anything could. And I want to encourage you today to give your life to Jesus. Focus on Him, because He knows exactly what you need. He knows what you want too, but that's not always what you need. He knows what you need. And just like your father or a father figure, He's going to keep on providing to you. He's going to look after you, but you have to submit. You have to surrender to Him fully. And that's basically the story of how I met Jesus and how I went from someone who was so lost to the world to someone who loves Jesus with all his heart. And I honestly tell you, I would give up anything for my relationship with Jesus today. And that's the story of how I met Jesus.